This message here is also not going to be peaceful, and therefore I'm not going to start off with the peace greeting. You see the title, and well, let me just start by saying that I'm going in. I'm going to go in on the sisterhood of failure, and I'm also going to go in on the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Afghans, and the Arabs. And the reasons that I'm going to go in on them are going to be because of what the actual truth is now that I've been able to live in different nations and see, make a comparison. Years ago, I would have said, yes, there is colorism to a certain extent. And I would have said that when a black man prefers light-skinned women, it is because he is a colorist. If he prefers dark-skinned women, it's because he is pro-black. If he prefers women in the middle, then he is normal. If he doesn't have a complexion preference, he's normal. Years ago, I would have stated it exactly like that, because I am against white supremacy to the bone. I was back then and I am now. And when I say sisterhood of failure, I am referring specifically to what Kendra D would call the hyenas, and to whom Edward Anderson would refer as the colorism crybabies. And they'll use colorism as an argument or as an excuse for why they don't get chosen. But a man better not use colorism or height discrimination or income discrimination or materialism or runaway hypergamy as a reason that he doesn't get picked. Simply put, they're the ones who would tell me that I didn't get picked because I'm just not man enough or alpha enough or select enough. And they would tell you the same thing, but then they would say that they don't get chosen because they have 4C hair, wide noses, big lips, and they're abundantly melanated, or, one or the other. My answer to that would be that there may be parts of the world in which, matter of fact, I know there are parts of the world in which this is the case. Black America is not necessarily one of them, except maybe in a few parts of maybe in California, I heard it's like that there. Or if you go into some very, very old money black wealthy families, that may be the case if they're willing to listen to these matriarchs. Patriarchs generally aren't willing to say something like this because patriarchs, black patriarchs, understand that there are a lot of other things you have to worry about before you can sit up and obsess over a specific skin complexion. There is such a thing as gaslighting, but what I found is that gaslighting is actually more likely to happen to men than from men. Now, for boys, for teenage boys especially, you could say they gaslight because they get gaslighted. That's just something that teenagers may tend to do. But for grown men who have any modicum of education, I can't say that there's gaslighting. And one of the reasons is because when men are colorists, they tell you this. And if they are strictly, and that's if you want to call it colorism when it's just a personal preference. If they have a preference for a woman, specifically when it comes to complexion, they'll say that they have this preference. I understand why, if you were pro-black and you hate white supremacy, you would say that preferring dark skin is normal, preferring light skin is white supremacist and brainwashed. I understand why you would say that. On the surface, I do. But as you get older, you have to factor in things that you previously did not know. You become responsible as you know. And when a black man prefers any particular complexion because he's gotten more love from the women with that complexion, that is an imprint. That is what I've referred to as the practiced preference, or the preference that comes from experience. I've referred to this before. And black men have an excuse because black men must learn to not prefer that which does not prefer them. I had to learn not to prefer certain things, and it was only in black women. I had to learn not to prefer an advanced degree in an African American woman. I had to learn not to prefer actually that which would have been preferable, because once they achieved it, they did not always become buttholes, but simply put, they were not even available, let alone interested in a black man of this phenotype. That wasn't going to happen. And I had to come to understand that and see that it wasn't even considered wrong. I had to come to understand that if they were close to my height, if we were close in age, if our educations were similar and they were nice to look at, they were going to see everything wrong and nothing right. And they were even going to misunderstand certain things that I did, i.e., opening doors for them, paying for the meals, just everything was wrong in those cases. And I came to understand, yeah, everything is wrong. There's not really, there's no effective game to use, because all game is bad game when it comes to them. They simply have had so many options, so many thirsty niggas, that they're just used to seeing through everything. They're used to seeing something bad behind everything that they see. They're used to having a bad assumption, and it turns out to be true behind everything. So yes, yes, it actually does turn out that he's doing this because he's thirsty and he's desperate and other women don't want him. So therefore, I don't want him either. This does happen. When it comes down to gaslighting, that's not something that men have done. Now, I've admitted that there have been colorist black men. And like I've said, I know from experience they usually come with less education as well and tend to be younger. What you certainly are not going to find is an elder, well-educated black man that's also a colorist. And by colorist, I don't just mean that he has a particular preference for himself. I mean, he would even say to others, you're certainly not going to find a man who is mature chronologically and who has some education telling others that he can't stand no dark-skinned woman, let alone that they should avoid dark-skinned women. They don't say that. What I can also tell you too is this. There are complexion preferences with regards to the women. We're trained to accept that they have preferences, and it is okay. And to give an example of how it is that men are hyper-analyzed, we're over-analyzed by these women. I'm not going to forget when my colleague, the same one that got me on this path to learning about this rabid feminism and how it's affecting the black community, when she asked me a question about Me Too, and then 2 days later asked me why the men in the teachers' residential building are not approaching the women. That same one. I'll never forget when she got me on that path. I'll also never forget how she asked another colleague of ours from Philadelphia, hey, S, is black over here too light-skinned? And S said, yeah, actually, yeah. S said this in front of me. And she turned to S and said, you're not helping. I told him that doesn't even exist. Mind you, I'd already had my memory jarred, so I knew that it existed. I remembered and recalled that I had already learned that back in 2001. This conversation happened early 2018. I say about 2 months from now, 2018, maybe April 2018, this conversation happened. And I turned to the lady who was trying to tell me that it doesn't exist. Listen, it's not a bad thing. S, she can prefer what she wants. Mind you, I was also militantly pro-black too. I said to her, she can prefer what she wants. That's not necessarily wrong. It's okay. She's allowed to have a preference as long as she doesn't try to embarrass or shame other people for their preferences. She can prefer chocolate. She can prefer in the middle. She's only wrong if she goes to you and says, why are you with someone that is chocolate, or why are you with someone that's light skinned, or why are you with someone that's in the middle? That's all. It's not an insult. It's not offensive, and she's not in the wrong. She's not insulting anybody. She answered your question about her own preference. And S nodded her head in agreement. We understood. This is not an insult. She's not slapping me, and she's not dissing anybody for being with me. Now, to this day, S is also a friend of my wife. Look, the gaslighting does occur when it comes to sisters trying to tell brothers that this type of thing does not occur. Now, they can't deny that they have a preference when it comes to height. They will try to deny that they have a preference when it comes to complexion, because what they want to tell you is that you can continue to keep on trying. Now, they don't necessarily say, they don't say, well, in this part of the country, there are women that actually prefer that. That's not what they don't say. The other thing that they don't want to tell you is that the women who may prefer paler men usually don't have an education, and they live far away from any city with any exposure to anything else. And that they're still living in the plantation days when light-skinned brothers had money, or were expected to. They don't tell you about this. The other thing that they don't tell you is that you're also a mark. Anyway, let me go ahead and dig in to these Arabs and these Indians and these Pakistanis, because if you want to talk about real true colorism, now I'm digging into you guys. This is true. You Arabs, you Indians, you Pakistanis, and you Afghans, I don't necessarily hate you guys. Certainly not for your DNA, but there's something culturally speaking for which I'm not allowed to agree with you. You are colorist. You think that because you're not hateful, that you're not racist, but you, with your preference for the palest of women, even over the women of a normal phenotype for your people, have a massive inferiority complex. And you want to sit up and say that you don't have it. You want to sit up and say that you're normal. You want to sit up and say that, well, the whole world actually is this way, and therefore it's something encoded in human nature that men prefer white women. White women have been around for only 6,000 years. Other people have been around for longer, black folks being around for the longest. You tell me how it is that there's some evolutionary mechanism to prefer paler skinned women. You tell me how that makes any doggone sense in a world flooded with UV radiation, among a species that started in the tropics with the highest levels of exposure to UV radiation. You tell me how that makes any goddamn sense. You want to try to say that God is a racist, and that he created human beings with naturally racist and colorist tendencies in their marriage habits and their mating preferences. You want to sit up and say this, and some of you like to use the Quranic verse referring to the Hur al-Ain, the maidens of paradise, as being like pearls, to say that it is normal to prefer whiter women. I'm telling you, dummy, that doesn't make any goddamn sense, because pearls naturally come in 4 colors. And one of them is black. And you all don't want to understand this. You all want to go ahead and assume that this can't possibly be the case. There's no reason that dark-skinned women will be considered beautiful and equally as beautiful as very pale-skinned women. You will take a woman that is, you actually will do this. You niggas will take a woman that is average from Europe, but she's blonde hair with blue eyes and she's very pale. Or any light-colored eyes and pale skin, and you will act like she's just the most gorgeous thing in this world. And many of you who are Muslim, you'll look at her when she's not Muslim and you'll say, I'll marry her. Inshallah, she'll become Muslim. Why the hell would she do that when your inferiority complex is plain to see for everybody? You niggas have you have the most severe brainwashing. I thought black people, we all thought that we were the most brainwashed people in the world, and it turns out you actually are the most brainwashed. Because we're getting rid of ours, and you tragic desert mulattoes are not getting rid of yours. You're not even questioning it. You just take it for granted and want to say it's human nature, like God created you to be not only a racist, but a racist in favor of the oppressors of the planet and not in favor of your own ancestors. You can't sit up and say that it is a personal preference when all of you culture-wide prefer the exact same thing, even over that which is natural for your own women. That's not, no, that is colorism. That is not human nature, and don't try to justify it as such. You would rather blame God because you're brainwashed by the oppressor than to stop and think, you know what, maybe, possibly, just maybe, this has been us. And then some of you want to turn around and actually blame colonization for it. But what you don't understand is that that in some of your cultures, this colorism actually precedes colonization. And you don't want to deal with that, especially those of you in India and Pakistan. You want to point to the British colonization. Hold up, slow your roll. What about the caste system that preceded British colonization, that actually allowed the British to march into the Indian subcontinent already at the top of the caste system because they were white? What about that? See, you don't want to face the fact that in reality, you have listened to a force that is not even human. You have listened to an entity that is not even descended from Adam and Eve. You have listened to an entity that from which the word demon even comes. You have listened to the most evil spirit that can circulate around the globe, whisper in your ear that the oppressor is superior and that the oppressed is inferior and that your own ancestors are inferior. Never bothering to think maybe this voice that's whispering in your ear that white is so gorgeous is also the one that told white to come in and oppress you and us, but never told you that we were your ancestors and the ancestors of white folks. Yet and still to this day, when you see black folks who have been living in your area for thousands of years, you will refer to them as the originals. Oh yeah, I'm not forgiving you, and I'm not going to let you use Islam as a reason to tell me not to tell the rest of the world that actually you are more brainwashed to a certain extent than white folks are. Because while they will correct and they might confront that brainwashing, at least they understand the term. You don't. You just simply accept that white people are somehow some kind of superiors. If you accept that they are just naturally more beautiful than you, you got a damn problem, because they're a race like everyone else. They have a high population, and you know, and as well as I do, that you can't walk down one village street in any remote location in the world and everybody's good looking and everybody's ugly, or everybody's ugly. You know that if you walk down a village street that may be the size of the White House, you're going to see the good looking, the in between, and the ugly in one village, even within the same family, no matter where you are in the world. So how the hell can you possibly believe that an entire race associated with the oppression of everyone else is also the most beautiful, and the race opposite them is automatically the ugliest, even though that other race opposite them is the most original, the first one from which you also come? Who could train you to believe this and then get you to blame God for thinking this way? Then you turn around and want to tell us black folks, well, you know, it's just human nature. You Arabs are really bad about that, actually. And then some of you people from the subcontinent want to sit up and say it's human nature, and others of you want to say that, well, it's only because of colonization, because you don't want to admit that you've been white supremacists since before white folks landed on your shores. You don't want to admit that, because you know how much of an insult that is to black folks, and it should be. We should be grabbing you by the necks just based on that opinion by itself and just choking you out. Not even because it's a personal preference. Not even because of that. And by the way, that's not personal, so don't say it is. But simply because you're going to sit up here and try to tell us that it's something natural. Nature never favors the oppressor. God never favors the oppressor. He didn't design you with a conscience that would allow you to do that. When you do it in spite of your conscience, not because of it. You do it in spite of the way you were designed, not because of it. But you want to sit up here and try to tell us that that's normal and we should just stop. We shouldn't complain about it. No. How about you take that skin bleach off the shelves and replace it with skin darkener? How about that? You would not do it. No skin darkening product is ever on the shelves in any of your nations, even though you might need it. Because you have bred yourselves to the point where you're not producing enough melanin for the UV radiation to which you were exposed throughout the year in your home climates. And you want to sit up here and act like we're just bitter, sore losers. No. You were the original white supremacists. That's what it was. Let me include Persians in that too. Africa never did anything to Persia or modern-day Iran. Europe did, starting with England. And what is your attitude to this day? Especially those of you who left Persia or Iran and went to the West, especially your attitude. What is your attitude to this day? Your child marries someone white and isn't Muslim, and you feel like you've arrived. Your child even looks at someone black who is Muslim for too long in the masjid, and you feel like you failed, and you wish you had stayed back home. That is a travesty. You see, it's understandable when some people simply want to stay within their own. And if you felt like your kid failed because they were attracted to anyone outside of your group, that's biased enough. But at the very least, we might say, yeah, but see, it's not racist, it's more nationalist. But we can't even talk about nationalism because your nationalism is affected by racism and colorism. And as a matter of fact, you Persians may have been the first racist and colorist people ever in the world. Because some of your kinfolks that left Persia a long time ago and went into India started the oldest religion with white supremacy encoded in it, which was Hinduism. It has a caste system named Varna, and Varna is the word for color. What was it designed to do? It was designed to stop the Dravidians from further mixing with the Aryans any more than they had already done at the start of this thing, because the Aryans saw that the kids looked more like Dravidians than themselves, and they didn't like that. They didn't want to lose their precious whiteness, even though they were now in a subcontinent that's pretty warm and exposed to a good bit of UV radiation throughout the year. That's the real colorism and racism. And Sapphire, Boom Quisha, Boom Shika, if you really want to attack someone for real, true to life colorism and racism, regardless of how they have been treated, as a matter of fact, in spite of how they have been treated by people paler than themselves, and in spite of how they have been respected by people darker than themselves, go in on them. Don't go in on Junebug and Shine. Because for the most part, Junebug and Shine, by the time they're adults, especially if they get education, they are more likely to prefer that which has generally preferred them over the years without having to be obese, burdened down with kids, debt, insecurities, and things like that. That's the real truth of the matter. If only light-skinned women who were also in good shape physically and mentally preferred me over the years, I probably would have never had a preference for chocolate sisters. It might have never developed. As it is, in my case, both seem to be embarrassed at the thought of the prospect or the experience of being seen out in public with me. And I'm only one person. I am fortunate that I still have a preference for us. You were fortunate that many black men go through what I went through for other reasons, i.e. height, whatever the case is, and they still have a preference for us. But if you want to talk about actual racism and colorism, go in on these semi-Negroes. They're the ones that not only have it, they will sit up and try to use God and nature to justify it and say that human beings are designed this way, even though we got started, obviously, somewhere tropical, because they know people started off black. So quit going in on us about that. You can go in on yourselves, and you can go in on these other men and their women. Because really, in all truthfulness, those are the men that look at you and say you are automatically unattractive because you're black. They're the ones who say that. It ain't black men saying that. It is these guys, these semi-Negroes, our grandkids that forgot where they came from. They're the ones that say that right off the bat. Because you are black, they say you were unattractive. Some of them say you have the best bodies, and all that means is, oh yeah, I want to dig one out and bust a nut in it, but then I want to move on. And when it's time to commit, I'll commit to a really pale woman from my background if I can find her, or from Europe if I can find her. But she's too dark, not to screw, but to marry. Do you understand? The real truth colorism that you're dealing with is going to be from them. Black men, they've been let that go. These half-black, don't know they black, semi-desert mulattoes, semi-Negro tragic desert mulattoes are the ones that they're holding on to it. And even try to use Quran verses sometimes to justify it, despite the fact that the verse they use refers to a substance or refers to a creation that comes in 4 colors, one of them being black, the other being purple, the other being gray, and the other being white. And they don't even know that that's the case. I'm going to say this, sisters. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, run amok, led astray. Yeah, you heard me say this before, and you know who said it before I did. Tricked, deceived. You've been had. You didn't land on colorism. Their colorism landed on you, and you didn't even see it coming. Well, now you know. And if any of you ever want, I could probably post a screenshot to show you that they will sit up here and try to use God and nature to justify this, even though that's not true. And this is why it is that I didn't start this message with the peace greeting, because this is not a peaceful message. Go dig in on them like I just did. Call them a bunch of sellout hypocrites, because they were also colonized by the same massa, and they ain't fought back at all. I hope that one of these days what I'm saying won't be true anymore. In the meantime, I hope it's a benefit. Black heart, sign of black out. Black male power just because they don't like it.